When you're doing lip syncing in Harmony, what we need to do is we need to have a character to work with. The first thing that I'm going to do is to develop that character. We'll need a head on one layer, and the mouth and the different shapes of the mouth that we will work with need to be on a separate layer. So since I know my first layer is going to be a head, I am going to name it as such. I'm going to just create a new color to be my drawing color. I highly recommend that you create colors to be part of your project and not just rely on the default colors that are there, but customize your color palette and give them names. Eventually, we'll probably add in some extra colors to represent the teeth, the tongue, and the inside of the mouth, since that will show in some of the different mouth shapes. But first, I like to just get the mouth shape sketched and to figure out the character that I am working with. So with my outline or stroke color selected, we can just plan out that ideally we might even want to set the eyes onto a separate layer, because if the eyes are on a separate layer, that's going to be an additional element that we can animate. That way we can make the eyes open and close, we can move them around in the head, and it gives us greater flexibility. It's a common way of structuring or building your character is you put your head shape on one layer, you have your features on separate layers. That way you can move them all independently, which allows you to create subtle head movements. So it may appear that the head is turning by just sliding the features around on the face or head shape itself. So that can be a useful way of working with your character. So I guess to demonstrate that, just get rid of that. So if there's a head layer, and then add in another drawing layer, this one, put the eyes there, add another drawing layer, nose, and finally the mouth. It's a good practice to build your layers as you are working so that you are able to have them to work with before you even start creating any content to go along with it. Now I can see I accidentally added 2 eye layers, so I'll get rid of one. Now on this layer, give my character some eyes, nose, and finally I'm going to give my character a mouth. Now the mouth that I'm going to start with is going to be the mouth of the character in a neutral or closed position. And when we do this, it's important to think about what does the character look like when they're not speaking, because the other mouth shapes that you work with are representing different phonetic elements of the English language. So we refer to these as the phonemes. And when I look at those, we see that for doing a consonant style sound where the mouth is closed, the M's, the B's, the P's, if you practice that sound or say that sound out loud, you realize that you hold your lips tight and stretched across your mouth, which is different than the neutral mouth. So the neutral mouth is when you're saying nothing, where the MBP mouth is where you are now stretching the mouth a little bit for that consonant sound. So when I look at that, I may pull that across. Now it's useful when you are doing your lip syncing to have that chart handy. So if I were to, because my display isn't too big, maybe pull it over with Harmony so I can now set my mouth here. Another way of working with it is instead of doing that is you may bring it in as an artwork layer in Harmony, just so you have it to reference in the program, then you delete it or turn off the visibility of that layer when you don't need it. One thing to note inside Harmony right here is each layer as it's active, we'll see that it grays out the other layers, which is a nice way of knowing what's on which layer. But if you don't like that, we can change how things look. So we are able to see what finished artwork looks like. But if we go to our light box far left and turn that off, now it shows every artwork layer as a finished artwork layer. I'm going to encourage you to keep the light box on. And the light box is working kind of in the way of, if you imagine traditional animators would work on a light table, drawing on transparent paper or film so that they could see through other layers of their drawing as they lined up the different artwork layers. Turning on that light box gives you some of that kind of illusion that you can see what is your active layer, but the other layers do show through to a little bit. And that helps me to go, okay, I'm on the head layer, not on the mouth layer. Now if I want, I can go through and I can grab my fill color and I can fill it in and work with it, but the only layer that I really care about at the moment is going to be my mouth layer. So if I see my MVP sound, where you pull the mouth all the way across. Now this can be different than my mouth where I could just be, this is, character not talking. Now at this point I look and I can't quite tell, is this mouth in the correct alignment to my other layers? I can't tell, is it in correct alignment to the other mouths? So we need to fix that. And to do that, what I can do is I can turn on onion skinning to see how this mouth compares to the previous one, clicking on onion skinning on the left side. But what I can also do is take my other layers and extend them out. Now when I look here, I'm going to have a series of mouths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Probably have an extra mouth, 8, and the neutral mouth, 9. So knowing that I'm going to need these different mouth shapes, I can extend out my other layers by clicking in those layers, and I can right click and extend the exposure. We'll also know how to extend exposure is F5. So if I hit F5 on the keyboard or I click right here, it extends those layers out. So we can see how they extend out. So if I go to the mouth, here's the mouth, but now in frame 2, the mouth is not lining up. But that's not really what I want for my second mouth. So we can start with mouth A and work our way through alphabetically. Or we can start with the neutral mouth and then work the other mouths after it, because when we're done, we will have to go through and provide specific names to each one of these drawings so that the program knows how to use them to automatically map them to my dialogue. And that's where it gets really fun. It's very important when we are looking at these mouths to notice that we will give each mouth shape a name. We will call this mouth shape A, this mouth shape B. But if you try and say the letter B, that is not what your mouth looks like. It looks more like this. C, E, well, it kind of overlaps, but E, the mouth opens. When you do the A sound, the mouth opens more. Then you can see the O versus the U sound. The U or the oo sound where you pull the lips in tight. So then you start looking more like a fish. But we label that F. That will be mouth shape F. G is where you're doing the F or V, where you bite down on your lower lip. When you do an F sound, you close your teeth onto your lower lip as you make that sound. One of the more common extra mouth shapes that you will want to use is for the letter L, because for the letter L, the tongue is going to be pushing against the top of your mouth and against the back of your upper teeth, which makes it different than, say, a C or a D mouth, where you can see that the tongue is down, setting comfortably on the bottom of the mouth. So each of these mouth shapes corresponds to sound. It doesn't correspond to a letter. It corresponds to a sound. And the software will then analyze the sounds that it's hearing and try to match up the best mouth shape to correspond to that sound, not to a letter. That's the important thing to keep in mind. We are not saying that this C is meaning we're making a C sound, that this G, we're making a G sound. We're making an F or V sound to go with our mouth that we throw a label of G onto. So the first thing is to draw the head and other features you want to animate, and then start drawing the mouths on their corresponding mouth layer. And the sequence or order in which you draw them does not matter. You just have to know which one represents which mouth. And as you look through it, you can look at, in the other mouth guide, some of the other mouth shapes and work with those or try them out. In this handout, it's showing both the frontal and profile view that you could use. So you could turn your character sideways. You could also do a 3/4 view and try and draw the mouth like that. It depends on your artistic ability and what you want to do. With my core mouths roughed in, I have my neutral mouth, and I have my first mouth for A, then my B, C. So we can see I have the different mouth shapes. I'm also realizing that my head is probably going to need some adjustment for it to fit, or what I will need to do is to add to each of these layers additional chin artwork to be part of the mouth for when it extends below the rest of the face. And that's not an uncommon occurrence. And we'll look at how to go about doing that here as I start coloring things in. So here's my core mouth shape. I'm going to just fill the head in with the fill color just to make it easier to see when I'm working with that shape. So now here I have the mouth. If I move to the next mouth, that's still good. But now I need to fill the teeth in. So I will choose my teeth color and fill in the teeth. I like to go through each frame of the animation then and start coloring it in as I start completing it, instead of finishing coloring one. For me, it's faster to stay on one color and run that across all of the frames. And I think I have a tongue in one of the shots there. So now I have my different mouth configurations. So when the mouth is stretching down, what I want to do is, with the paintbrush, extend the chin. And then I will do some painting in to help fill that up. I move to the next. And I'm doing this on the mouth layer, not on the head layer, because the head isn't changing shape. So I want it to be tied to it. So now we can see how the mouth is extending down. And I will then need to do a little bit of painting in with the skin color to fill where that hole is going to be occurring. So as I move through some of these frames, we need to do a little covering up. So I'm essentially providing a patch. But doing this allows me to have more flexibility, and also it will create a little smoother quality in the animation, making it look a little bit more true frame by frame, even though we're taking advantage of what is more symbol-based approaches. If I turn off the light table, it gives me a better illusion of what is happening. So I can see my different mouth configurations as the character is talking.
How do you make
My mouths have been created. The image has been colored so we can see how it animates through. I need to clean up a little bit on the jaw with that frame, but it's workable right now. So because I extended the jaw down, I do need to do a little bit of that cleanup. With the mouths here, and if you scrub through, and if it looks relatively smooth, like the character could be talking, you can even just test. So if I click out in my timeline and hit F5 to extend my exposure, now if I have this series of frames that I have drawn, I can highlight those, I can copy those frames, I can paste that in, so I have more to work with. And now if I scrub this, we'll see that it kind of looks like they're talking. It is one of the key things with the characters. It's really important to keep the teeth stationary because they're attached to the head. The teeth should only move with the head. The lips are moving on top of the teeth. Remembering that gives you a much more believable look to your character. Now, when doing this, if I want to just shorten up the playback, put on looping, hit play, we can see how it's starting to look like the character is saying something. There's a smoothness to it. It's a little bit off on that corner, but I can live with it right now since we're just on demonstration purposes. If I extend this back out, you see there is now my timing. After I have gotten this far, what we need to do is to properly label each one of the mouths. And this is where I have to introduce something we haven't talked about before, which is how our camera view is different from our drawing view. The drawing view is showing me the artwork, the drawing, that is part of just that frame. So we can see how here's each of the mouths, and then it repeats. So I'm just going to get rid of the ones I don't need. So here are my mouth shapes. So these are the drawings. So the drawing view shows you the artwork that's only on that layer, not on a transparent background. Sometimes you want to work in the drawing view because it isolates. Instead of having to go through and turn off a bunch of layers to work, it just puts your artwork on a white background and allows you to see what's there. And it works really well unless you're trying to draw white, because then it shows up white on white and then you're kind of out of luck. Top right, I'm going to choose my library. My library has a really interesting thing going on because I started my project and I made some failed mouths and deleted them and then added new ones. Well, notice if I watch in my library, up right here. I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger. So in the library, as I scrub through, you'll notice how it tells me the name of the layer, and it gives me a number. By default, Harmony will label your drawings with a number. So if you do frame-by-frame drawing as part of your animation, those frames show up as the individual drawing frames. Now if you remember, I drew a mouth and then drew another mouth, and then I had some extra ones because my first mouth is at number 3, but if I go left here, we'll see, wait, there's another mouth. There's some extra mouths, and then if I go all the way to the beginning, there's nothing. So each one of these mouths are the drawings that are part of this layer. And if I delete artwork on screen and make new artwork, it doesn't eliminate that drawing from memory unless I manually do it up here. So if I know that those first 2 were my junk ones that I did before I redid them, and I want to get rid of them because the mouth I want to use is going to be the 3rd frame right here, I need to get rid of those drawings, or at least rename all the other ones first and then delete it, because right here, this drawing, under the drawing pull-down menu, I can choose delete selected drawing, and then that will get rid of that drawing I don't want. So I want this drawing I don't want, and it's being difficult right there. Frame 1. Getting rid of bad drawing number 1, we will see that I can choose delete selected drawing. It got rid of it. Now if I go here, there's my other bad drawing. Under drawing, delete selected drawing. So I had 2 bad ones that I didn't want to use. So now if I look, I have only my good ones, which started at drawing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And 10. So these are the drawings I want to use. What we have to do is we have to name those drawings correctly. My first drawing is my neutral mouth. The neutral mouth, we give a name of X, capital letter X. Oh, but you can't do what I just did. By typing in the name here, it's actually creating an extra drawing. So we don't want to do that. So, because it's trying to find it. But what we have to do, and this is, it's really easy. You're like, oh, I'll just go in and rename things by hand. What we do is with that drawing active, we have an option to right click on it, and under drawings we'll notice that, okay, it's not giving it to me. Under the drawing pull down menu, it's not there. Write down in your notes or in the handout, the notes on lip syncing, it actually says just use Command D. So I click on the first mouth, I hit Command D, comes up with the menu. Rename drawing. My first drawing, my neutral mouth, gets a name of X. Okay, move to my next frame. That is going to be my MBP sound, that next one right here, and that is going to be called A. So Command D, now I type in the letter A. Move to my next drawing. That is going to be my consonant mouth, letter B. So Command D, call it B. Make sure you're naming them with capital letters, and we will name them A through G plus the letter X. Now this is going to be my C mouth.
White capital letters.
So I move to my next frame, Command D, and then type in the name. Move to my next frame, Command D, type in the name. Next frame, Command D, type in the name. Move to the next frame, Command D, type in the name. Once your mouths have all been named, X and then A through G, if you have any extras, name them accordingly. Then you will be able to extend out your mouth and make it match the sound, which we will look at in just one moment. After your mouths have been named, after they've been added to the timeline, you can cycle through, make sure it all looks good. The next thing that we need to do is to bring the sound into the project. So File, Import Sound. When you do that, you get to go find the sound file. One is being provided for you today. Brings the sound in. Now, if you realize that the sound is going to be, or you need more frames in your timeline to bring in the sound, you certainly can do that by extending out your timeline. So if I look here, I'll see that I have some sound. I believe it's going to be longer. So if I want to extend it out, we can go into my scene and change my scene length here. Currently it's at 60 frames. I could go up to 120 frames. We can see how the sound is now extending out as well with this. You can also just grab and drag out the red play handle, and I believe that is the end. Somewhere around here, somewhere around 135 frames should encompass all of it. If we realize it's stopping early, we can quit it. Or not quit it, we can add frames. If I F5 my other layers to extend them out, I don't need to add frames to the mouth layer. When we do the lip syncing, it will add the frames to it as well as choose the correct frame for it. So step one on the sound part is get the sound in. File, Import Sound. Extend your project to match what you want with the sound. That's important. Once the sound has been placed in your project, now we are ready to start lip syncing to it. And to do that, right click on the sound layer and you will see lip sync pops up. And the first thing that we need to do is to select auto lip sync detection. And what that will do is that will allow Harmony to analyze the sound. And then we will choose map lip sync, where we will choose how to map it out. So I choose auto lip sync there. We can see it's computing it. It's now analyzed that piece of audio. So again, right click in the timeline, lip sync, auto lip sync detection. Once you have completed that, you choose map lip sync. And this is where you can choose which layer is being mapped to it. And if your mouth is not immediately below the sound layer, it chooses the next layer down. So if you have 100 layers, you need to scrub through this list until you find it. Because my mouth is right next to it, it came up right there. If I named my layers something other than A through G and the letter X, I could type those frame names in right here. It's generally better to just rename your drawings and be done with it. Though if you prefer to have named your drawings based on the sounds that they are representing, you could then type those names in, but you would have to make sure you type them in correctly here. And if I look, I will notice how these drawings are now corresponding to those different mouth shapes that we've talked about. And now I hit OK. And I will see that it is now remapped my mouth here. to correspond. Of course, I can't hear the sound yet because I haven't enabled audio for this layer or for my program. Inside the timeline window, there's an option to enable sound as well as enable scrubbing of sound. So if I turn those on, now if I scrub the timeline, I can hear the sound playing back. I can also then just hit play.
It always seems impossible until it is done. Nelson Mandela.
Okay. And after listening to that, I think I need to extend out a little bit more because it seems the sound ended early. Extend out the other frames with F5. And I had a little goof up in it that I didn't like how it looked.
It is done. Nelson.
So where it says it is done,
Nelson Mandela.
right after it is done,
Done. No.
there's a little extra mouth shape that I don't like how it changes to that. So what I can do is I can now highlight those frames and bring them back to my neutral mouth because the mouth is done speaking.
It is done. Nelson Mandela.
And I should probably end on the closed mouth for the final frame. I've decided I want to make my character blank, and what that really requires me to do is to insert a new drawing at this point in time. And there's a variety of different places that I can do it. I can right click, so I can create an empty drawing, and because I'm planning to do it frame by frame, I could create a duplicate drawing which would allow me to leave the drawing as is and then just do some modifications to it. So both would work in this instance. I'll just create an empty drawing. We'll see it comes up empty. We can now look in our library and see that I have the two that are there. Really should use onion skinning if I'm doing this so I can better control where the eye shows up in relation to it. And with this, I am going to create it not as a one frame just with a blank, but I'm going to then add a few frames to it. So now I'll right click again. This time under drawings I'll create a empty drawing once more. And I'm going to tighten up my onion skin a little bit because I only want to see the previous frame. And now the eye has been closed. If I turn off onion skinning, we'll see so we're getting this sense of animated closure. The lid is coming down, it's closing. I think on the lid coming down, I even want to just erase a little bit out of here. So I can create that, and then I can even now on the next frame go back a frame so it's the lid is reopening. So if I hit play,
Until it.
you'll notice that that goes really, really fast. The speed of the blank when I hit play,
Until.
and you can see it's really, really, really fast. So what we might want to do is stretch it out a little bit. So I have 2 frames going down, and now I might pull this back for it to be closed, to down close it for 3 frames so we can see it. Pull it back and pull it back open. So now if I hit play,
until it is
it slows it down a little bit to make it a little more useful as a blink. So if you do the blink too quick, it just looks like a strobe or a flash. But it will require you to periodically add enough individual frames or drawings to that animation to make the blink successful. Now, the question came up of, are these parts tied to each other that if I move, say, the eyes over or down, will that affect everything? And the answer is yes, because I am transforming a whole layer. Now, if I use the transform tool, it will introduce keyframes as I move things down. So if I wanted to move the eyes, so let's say when the mouth opens wide, I'm going to pull the eyes down a little bit. If I pull the eyes down, oh, hang on. If I pull the eyes down, oh, gotta get back on the eye layer. What we see is it's now created a keyframing motion. But well, those blinking eyes are still attached to that, even though they're different artwork. Same thing with the mouths. The keyframing affects the layer and doesn't care what is happening to the drawings on that layer. So when we do our drawings, if I look in my drawing window here, if we think about if I'm doing a mouth, I draw the mouths in the same relative position to each other so that when I animate them, they can move. So I don't have different drawings where I'm moving it around within the drawing window to go, oh, well, at this point, the character's on the right side of the screen or the left side of the screen, so I draw over there. The drawing is always going to be centered on its position in the character, and then we will be typically using keyframes to move things around. So if I want to animate the mouth, but if I slide my mouth because of adding the chin artwork in here and not building enough of a patch, it's probably going to break the animation, but that's okay. So if we wanted everything to move, or if we want the eyes, nose, and mouth to all move, say at this point, I can select all three of those items and hit F6 to add in a keyframe. And now if I go over a few frames and decide that I want to move everything over just a little bit, so I could now shift my artwork over, and we'll see that the whole face has shifted over. So now if I want to shift everything back, I can pull everything back. Now because the eyes had a different keyframe going on, they're going back to their original keyframe, which is why he has the shifty look going on right now.